Hello, and welcome to Crimson Rain. This is my review of the dumb husky and his white cat, Shizun.二哈和他的白猫师尊. The novel was written in 2017 by Meatbun Doesn't Eat Meat and is her debut novel. The novel has 311 chapters with 39 extra chapters and was published in a serial format on JJWXC. Before we continue, I just want to say that this part of the video does not have any spoilers. There's a separate spoiler section at the end. And also, I will be referring to the novel as Arha going forward. Arha tells the story of a cultivator named Moran, who one day wakes up in the body of his teenage self and is given a chance to relive his life. In his past life, Moran had managed to conquer the entire cultivation world and become the bloodthirsty and infamous evil emperor, Ta Xianzhen. The two things that remain etched in his heart from his previous life are his love for his senior sect brother, his Shizun, and his absolute hatred for his master, his Shizun, Chu Wanning. As the novel progresses, we see Moran retrace the steps of his past and realize that he really didn't understand the people around him or the world that he was living in before. This review will be structured in two parts. First, I will talk about the things that I didn't like about this novel, then we'll explore the things that I really liked, and then I'll give my final thoughts and recommendations. So let's start with the things that I didn't like about this novel. First up is Meatbun's tendency to be long-winded. She really takes her time writing, and it seems as though she could have been a bit more succinct. For example, every character in the story has a backstory, and every backstory is explored at some point in the novel. Some characters just don't feel important enough to the story being told to have their full history explored. Some of them could probably have been discussed or summarized in a paragraph or two. Another thing is the explicit scenes. So this novel is infamous for having some very detailed, explicit sex scenes, and at points it did become a bit gratuitous for me. And while I understand that this may be the appeal for some fans, I also feel that it's something to note if you don't really enjoy these kinds of scenes, mainly because in this novel you can't really skip them. In these scenes, you get flashbacks and you get important dialogue that really help to move the plot forward and also give us some insight into the characters. So if you aren't really interested in reading these kinds of scenes, that's something to consider before you pick up Arha. And lastly, one of the things that I didn't enjoy about this novel is that important plot points and exposition is sometimes spoon-fed to the reader by the author, and things are repeated in order to make sure that you got the point. However, I do think that this could just be a side effect of the fact that it was published serially, and I don't think that Meatbun really went in and edited the novel much after it was published. So when you publish serially, depending on the release schedule, you can't always trust that a reader reading chapter 250 something will remember or even know what happened or what was foreshadowed in chapter 2, for example. So I feel that this could be a reason why this exists in Arha. Now let's talk about the things that I liked. First and foremost, Meatbun's writing style. As expected with the cultivation novel, there is a good use of poetry and some very deep, thought-provoking passages and scenes, as well as the incorporation of religious texts and symbols in the writing. Meatbun also has a very good use of questions, having the characters ask either out loud or in their minds whether what they did was justified and if what they did still upholds the principles that they strive to live by, and then not explicitly answering those questions, but rather leaving it to the reader to decide. It forces you to explore your own beliefs and ideas on morality and good versus evil. Another strong point for the writing that Meatbun does expertly is including tropes in a way that they no longer feel like they're just included as tropes. For example, usually in cultivation novels, you find the trope of a main character becoming a younger version of themselves at some point through the story. And I love this trope. I love how cute it ends up being and how it adds some adorable interactions for the characters. So when I saw Meatbun introduce this in Urha, I expected to see something like that. However, she actually used it to further the plot and allow the lead characters to explore their relationship in a way that wouldn't have been possible if they were still adults. In fact, it was to the point where I don't think the protagonist would even have had the story arc that he did and the realizations and epiphanies that he did if she hadn't included it. So I honestly felt like applauding Meatbun for how masterfully done this was. In addition to the good writing, Meatbun really has a talent for creating realistic characters. She seems to really understand people and what makes them tick. Each character in this novel is neither good nor bad. They are flawed, they are real, and they are human. Each character is a shade of grey, but not just grey. It's as though Meatbun has an entire palette of different shades of grey, and each character is a shade of grey that is distinct and unique from the others. Their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions are things that you have felt, or things that people around you have felt. Basically, the characters are rooted in emotional realism, even though they inhabit a fictional world. I also really enjoyed the world building of this novel. This novel for me is sort of a Dickensian version of a cultivation world. It's dark, it's dreary, and the evil nature of people and the cultivators is palpable. It's the kind of world that you would never want to wake up in. However, it is rich and detailed, and there could be so many more stories written in this world from other points of view that would be just as interesting. In fact, I think this is why Meatbun chose to set her second novel, Yuwu, in the same universe, and I really do hope that she chooses to set more stories in this universe in future. Now, one thing I need to warn you about when you're picking up Urha is do not read it on an empty stomach. The food descriptions are just so detailed and everything is so deliciously described that I was really salivating over some of the traditional Chinese dishes. In fact, I hadn't tried wontons in chili oil before reading this novel, and I was forced to go make myself a bowl after they were described several times. In my mind, I still call them Chimay's wontons, and yes, I know. Lastly, on the list of things that I really loved about this novel is the romance. The romance in this novel is not an idealized or aspirational kind of romance, but rather one that is real and one that makes sense for the characters. This is one danmei romance where I do not envy either character, nor would I ever want a relationship like theirs. Both characters are tragically flawed, but by the end of the novel, they learn to love and support each other in ways that help make up for each other's flaws, rather than building on those flaws and forcing them both into a spiral of toxicity and abusive tendencies. In short, this couple is shippable, but not enviable. Now, before I give my final thoughts and my recommendations, I do need to give a small caveat, and that is that Urha comes with a long list of trigger warnings and is, of course, infamous in the fandom for exploring darker themes and for the periods of non-consent between the two leads. The official English translation has been given an age restriction of 21, and that's something that I do agree with. I think you do need to be at an adult level of maturity in order to enjoy this novel in a responsible manner. And that's not to say that the novel is bad or not worth reading. It's just that the themes explored and Meatbun's persuasive way of writing really force the reader to empathize with even the most disgusting and vile characters and actions. So I do advise caution if you're thinking of picking up Erha. Make sure to check the trigger warnings and speak to someone about what you're reading while you're reading it. That said, I really loved this novel. It has incredible world building, extremely interesting characters, a very intriguing, although darker toned romance, and of course, some incredible food descriptions. It's one of the best written cultivation novels that I've read, and it definitely draws you in on this emotional roller coaster as you read through the novel. So if you're thinking of starting Erha, as long as you mind the trigger warnings, I highly recommend it. So that's the review. Thank you so much for listening. For those of you who have read the novel and for those of you who don't mind spoilers, let's talk spoilers. So I want to start by talking about Chuaning and Moran. I think that they're both so terribly flawed, but the way that they come to understand and love each other, and the way that the relationship evolves over the course of the novel is just so beautifully done by Meatbun. I remember in the chapter with the celestial rift in the second life, where Chuaning basically passes away at the end, and Meatbun says in her author's note that Moran is not in love with Chuaning, or he doesn't realize his feelings simply because of this one change in the story, because if it was that easy, then he just becomes a character that falls for anyone who dies for him, or dies in front of him, basically. And it just shows how much she understands her characters and how much she understands how people operate and how their emotions and feelings work, because having a whole lifetime of hatred for someone, whether it was real or forced, it's not going to go away with just one simple action. Rather, I feel that that one incident just starts the cogs turning in Moran's head and gets him thinking, I hate this person so much, but do I even know him? If I'm wrong about the reasons behind this one action of his, then how many more things am I wrong about? Do I even understand him at all? I think that's what starts the beginning of his epiphany. And the part where I think the walls really start to break down is when Chuaning is Sha Sini. And as I said in the previous part of the review, when this came up, I thought it would just be a way to have some cute moments for them, with Chuaning being young. But I feel that this really helped humanize Chuaning for Moran and the other disciples, and I really loved that Chuaning could finally be more himself. I think that Chuaning is a character that not only has responsibilities put on him by others, but then also adds to their own burden and their own responsibility. Other people put him on a pedestal, but then he resigns himself to being on that pedestal and doesn't really allow himself to interact with people on an emotional level. And, leaders and people that we look up to, those are the ones who always have to be strong. Their own feelings and their troubles are less important than helping and protecting other people, often at the expense of their own self-expression and their own ability to communicate. I mean, if the strongest cultivator in the world that everyone looks up to was to break down in fear and visibly not know what to do when disaster strikes, then what's going to happen to the other people? Wouldn't they be at even more of a loss? Wouldn't they fall apart even more, seeing that this person they look up to, the one that they're looking to lead them, is falling to pieces? So I think that because of this, Chuaning comes across so closed off and cold, but it was nice to see him as Sha Sini, where he could cry whenever he felt sad, and he could laugh when he was happy, things that he didn't feel he could do in his adult form. And with Moran, or whoever else he was interacting with, he could eat the things he wanted to eat, he could say what he wanted to say, he could do what he wanted to do, he could spend time with his disciples outside of the sect, and I think it really helped bond him and Moran, and showed Moran a side of Chuaning that he hadn't seen after spending an entire lifetime with him. And I think that's when Moran starts to see Chuaning as an actual human being, someone with feelings and emotions, and not just seeing him through his lens of assumptions about him. And I just think that whole arc was a masterclass in how to take a trope and actually make it mean something to the story. So well done to Meatbun for that. Now, on the subject of characters and them opening up, I did not at all expect the Shimei or the Hua Binan reveal. He was a brilliant villain, and honestly a real piece of work. However, I did like the path that the modern-day Shimei took. Although he played along for a bit, I like that he turned back before it was too late and decided to do what he could to atone for everything that he had done in the past. And also, just talking about his plan, Hua Binan knew that he was half deity. So he should have just let the other members of his clan go into the demon realm first and then gone last when he saw that they were checking, because of course it's going to be an issue. And I know from the later chapter with Moran and the Demon King or the Devil King, it seemed like he wasn't planning to accept them either way. He was looking for a reason to kick them out. But still, it was so dumb. He planned everything for 2 whole lifetimes, and it was a good plan. He was almost entirely successful, but he just fumbled it at the last minute. And for something so simple and easily fixed. I thought it was really silly of him in the end. I think his ego got a hold of him there. And just about Hua Binan, I can't fathom an actual person who would use others in this way and be so evil, even though we know that there are people in the world just like that. And yes, I do know that he suffered a lot of tragedy. His entire race is persecuted. He couldn't even cry because if he was exposed, people would hunt him down. And I mean, he was so young when he saw his mother literally being eaten in front of him because of their race. But I still don't think that that's enough to excuse the way that he went about his plan. I agree with what he wanted to do, but I do not at all agree with how he did it. And I also feel so terrible for Moran and the life that he had to live and endure because of Hua Binan's lack of empathy for others. I just think about a young Moran who basically sacrificed everything for Chu Wanning, a person who showed him just a bit of kindness and took the flower of evil into himself, and it just makes my heart ache. You know, looking at the scene where Taxian Jun takes Chu Wanning to show him the path of martyrdom that he's building, and very calmly explains to him how many people he's killed and how many more he needs to kill and is planning to kill. And then right after that, he just very casually asks him, you know, when I'm done killing all of these people, do you want to stay in this world or would you like to go back to your world? Like, it's so normal. I think it just shows the extent of the madness that has overtaken him, and it's so bad that he doesn't even know about it. He doesn't see what's wrong with what he's saying, and it's just really sad that by the time he was at that state and Chu Wanning figured out what had happened, it was too late to save him. He couldn't really be fixed at that point. And I do think that Chu Wanning let his personal feelings and emotions cloud his judgment when it came to Moran in the first lifetime. Because if it had been any other disciple who had undergone a change like that, I think he would have picked it up, he would have picked something up, and he would have been able to do something about it. At the end of the day, if you're taking a disciple and you're teaching them cultivation methods where they're basically going to become superhuman and be able to kill people with a snap of their fingers, you do have a bit of responsibility in ensuring that they're a good person. And that's why they're usually so strict about who they take and the kind of personality and character that their disciples have. And I think that there were clearly instances where Chu Wanning could sense something was off about Moran, and he wasn't yet too far gone at that point, even in the first life. But because he didn't want to confront Moran and basically see that Moran doesn't reciprocate his feelings of affection, he didn't want to confront the situation. He turned a blind eye to it until it was too late. And so I do think he has a bit of a role to play in Moran going down that path. And also, he has a very bad judge of character because he also took in Shimei, Hua Benan, and he was also terrible. Chuaning has terrible luck and choice in disciples. The only one that turned out halfway okay is Shuameng. And I think Chuaning he shouldn't take any more disciples. Just leave it now, it's done. But on a lighter note, talking about Shuameng, I love how when he and his dad meet, Meatbun says whenever father and son met, they have to spread their tail feathers and give each other compliments, and that's exactly what they always do, and I love it so much. And Shuameng for me was just such a naive and innocent character, and in a way that was realistic because he lived such a sheltered life compared to the other characters. And I didn't really enjoy the loss of innocence for him. I feel like it was kind of a rite of passage for him, and it did have to be done, especially for him to become a sect leader. He couldn't be that naive and unaware of the world. But I kind of miss the young and innocent, naive Shuameng. He was cute. And I really did not like the scene where Chuaning was in bed with Moran and Shuameng came to chat to him. I just feel like it was so unfair for Shuameng, the whole thing. And the worst part is he found out about it. He could have lived his whole life not knowing, but the Emperor just had to tell him and ruin the last bit of sanity that he had left at that time. And then lastly, but definitely not least, the rice cake spritz. I really like them. I like Moran's shock and horror when he discovers that they're real, and also they just seem so cute and adorable. Imagine having one as a pet. It would be so cute. I've also seen so much cute fan art of him, so I'm currently obsessed with rice cake spritz. They are adorable. So that's it for this review. Let me know what you guys thought of the novel, and if you are going to put spoilers, just write spoiler at the top of your comment so other people don't get spoiled. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and have some discussions on the characters and on the story itself. It is a bit of an emotional roller coaster, so I don't think I'll be reading it again anytime soon, but there are still moments and characters in the story that really live on in my mind. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys soon.